Would you hire a dentist to do heart surgery? No. No, not at all, right?
No.
You'd look for an expert. Entrepreneurial mindset is really important. Looking for ways to be creative, focusing on return on investment, or having an MBA in real estate are the two general ways that commercial agents gain a lot of knowledge, right? Besides doing it for a while. If you're a residential agent, you become an expert in homes, right? But if you're a commercial agent, you need to be an expert in every property type.
Thanks for joining us on another REI-NWA podcast. I'm your host, Coley Bailey, now principal broker at Lone Rock Realty. And today, this is episode 38, and we are diving into the world of commercial real estate. Maybe you've been doing some residential deals and you're looking to up your game. We have an expert with us today. This is Stephen Mansfield.
Good to see you.
Absolutely. Thanks for being in studio with us.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Cool. So we're going to get into all about commercial real estate. But first, as always, I like to rewind the clocks a little bit and get into who you are, where you come from, a couple career highlights. I know you have more career highlights than
it's been a long career
than a whole episode would normally cover. Sure. But just give us maybe the Cliff Notes.
Sure, Cliff Note version. I started in the commercial real estate industry 38 years ago. I was the first commercial mortgage trader on Wall Street. As a mortgage trader, you need to understand real estate. So a lot of my learning and knowledge base comes from those early days when I had to learn how to value, how to look at risks, and how to understand the underlying real estate so I could value a mortgage. And that's where I started, and it's been a long and steady career. Built a couple of businesses that were commercial real estate oriented. After that, went back to Wall Street for a little stint, and then I moved to Northwest Arkansas in 96.
Okay, where are you from originally?
Originally grew up in New Jersey.
Okay.
And spent much of my career in the Northeast until 1996. That's when I was recruited by Alice Walton to join her Llama Company investment bank here.
Okay.
And be a co-managing director of the real estate division. Did that with her, became director, and spent about 3.5 years in that business. Loved Fayetteville, loved living in Northwest Arkansas, even though it was a huge culture shock, as you can imagine, from Wall Street. And I started buying properties. I was buying apartment buildings, mostly right around the university. Built a really large portfolio, at least it was for me at the time, and realized I needed to manage this stuff. And so property management became part of it. I built a commercial and multifamily property management company, offered services to third-party as well as what we had, I had. Did that until about 2012, 2014.
Okay.
And I decided to move away and do some entrepreneurial stuff. And bought some older value-add properties, a crime-ridden and drug-infested apartment complex outside of Atlanta, and an old historical hotel outside of Cleveland, Ohio. Gutted them, renovated them. And then I came back in 2020, and now I'm running the commercial real estate group at RE/MAX Real Estate Results in Bentonville.
Yeah, fantastic company, fantastic team over there. You guys are doing amazing. So, all right, so let's talk a little bit about kind of the commercial mindset versus residential investing, because it's a whole different ballgame when you step up into commercial.
It is, and I think some of the big things that are different is the mindset is more entrepreneurial. It's really driven by not so much what's the cost of something, but what's the return on investment.
Right.
It's focused on earnings. It's focused on how do I add value. So in the residential world, if you're going to buy a house or a duplex or something, it's there a little bit, but it's not quite the same.
Like when you're valuing it, you're mostly looking at comparable sales.
Exactly. And in commercial it's very different. Right. If we take something and my personal preference for myself, and everybody's different on what they like to invest in, is value add. I think that there's opportunities to be creative, to find value that other people haven't. So for example, if you can just raise your net operating income by $1,000, if you're in a market that's in 8 cap, that brings you about $12,000 in added value, right? So you can't worry about the $1,000.
Break that down a little bit for our audience.
I will. So commercial real estate is valued based on its net income after all expenses, and then a return on investment. So simply...
So we're looking for what's the profit?
Yep.
And then how does that profit compare to the money that we put into it?
Exactly. Let's make it easy numbers, okay? if your property throws off $100 a year in net operating income and you want a 10% return, you should be willing to pay $1,000 for that property. Right? So if you can move that net income from $100 to $120, you should be willing to pay $1,200. It's a very different mindset from that standpoint. It's really driven by how do I make it better and how do I generate more money? I'll give you an example.
Okay.
So when I was here and investing in Fayetteville, mostly, I had a partner and we bought a property downtown, the old train depot on Dixon.
Okay. Yeah.
Okay. And we were looking at it and we had plans on what to do. You never stop. When you have the mindset of an entrepreneur in commercial real estate, you're always looking at alternatives. One of the things we found was there was some environmental issues. You don't have to look at that on a residential side for the most part. There's some issues with regard to maybe asbestos or lead-based paint from way far ago.
But you usually don't have an oil tank buried in the backyard.
Yeah, exactly. And here we had trains that for decades brought heavy metals up and down in their cars going from plants to mining operations. And we found that there was some issues. We dealt with that. We solved it. Cost money, but we found a way to increase our return on investment. And then we came up with the idea, and I hate to say this, but I hope nobody's upset with me, but decided we wanted to try putting parking meters in. There were no parking meters in Fayetteville at that time, right? But it turned out that those parking meters actually generated more net operating income, more revenue than we had with our tenants and everything else.
Than just the building.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So entrepreneurial mindset is really important. Looking for ways to be creative, focusing on return on investment.
And where is that value?
Yeah, exactly. And who hasn't picked it out before? How do you do that, right?
Yeah.
So very different mindset for a commercial investor.
Love that. So let's talk about working with professionals in the field. Okay. 4,000 residential real estate agents here in Northwest Arkansas. Do you know how many commercial ones? I haven't looked it
it's
up.
not as easy to know exactly, but I've done some runs to look up commercial agents on some of the commercial listing sites. Less than 1,000. So probably less than 500 if I had to guess. And those that are effective and those that are busy all the time, probably less than 200.
Yeah. I mean, there are definitely only a handful of names that come to mind.
Well, what's interesting is there are a handful of names, but there's a lot more teams.
Yeah.
So oftentimes you only hear the
name
of the team, right? But it's a very small number compared to residential.
So how does it differ working commercial agents versus
I hope
residential
I don't make
agents?
anybody upset, but would you
go for it?
Would you hire a dentist to do heart surgery? No, not at all, right?
No.
You'd look for an expert. So in the commercial field, there's a lot of ways to get education and get knowledge. The average commercial broker takes about 3 years of steady business to really become competent in the business. Having a CCIM designation, CCIM stands for Certified Commercial Investment Manager, or having an MBA in real estate are the two general ways that commercial agents gain a lot of knowledge, besides doing it for a while. So,
and it's hard to gain the experience. This is, I was talking to an agent that was like, I want to jump in and I want to do commercial. And I'm like, well, how quickly do you want to get paid?
Exactly.
Those deals are longer term deals.
They are.
Usually
they took longer to close. They took longer to evaluate, and they take longer to list and get sold.
Yeah. They take longer to acquire because you have to. Your network really matters.
Absolutely. Yeah. So I currently have 2 agents that work with me in our group, one of which had just like what you suggested, had no experience but wanted to learn the commercial business.
Right.
Okay? And I've trained a number of agents in the past and agreed that we were going to do this. And I explained to her it's probably a 4 to 6 month period where you're going to have no income.
Yeah.
And during that period, all we're going to do is train. And basically 3 to 5 hours pretty much every day learning the business. Because think about it. If you're a residential agent, you become an expert in homes, right? But if you're a commercial agent, you need to be an expert in every property type. So even multifamily, office, retail, industrial, and then you got all the strange stuff, hospitality, special sports arenas, whatever.
Taking raw land through a development process,
very
with
different.
engineering and
very different.
All the stuff. Yeah.
So I consider it tremendously different working with a commercial agent versus a residential agent, especially if you want an expert holding your hand and helping you be successful. And I think everybody should have mentors and guides. And even myself, after 38 years, I just signed someone up to give me a little bit of coaching. So it's never too late to learn.
The learning never ends.
No, it doesn't. Yeah. It doesn't. It shouldn't. So I guess, and it's frustrating for a lot of commercial agents, especially in today's market, right? Mm-hmm. We've had interest rates high. Right. Not a lot of sellers, especially those with 3% mortgages that want to sell. Right. And a lot of residential agents say, it's time for me to try commercial. Mm-hmm. I don't know if you're seeing that in your firm. I'm seeing it in a lot of different firms around Northwest Arkansas. Yeah. It frustrates me because generally, and I don't want to make specific examples, but generally, they don't have the knowledge to do that. Right. There's an agent that I know that listed a convenience store and gas station. I won't say where, but after a year on the market and I hadn't sold, she came to me and said, would you help me with this? I said, sure, let's look at the cash flow. And started.
She hadn't looked at the cash flow.
She had no idea. Right. She didn't understand underground storage tanks and the potential environmental issues. Right. She had no information, but she wanted to sell it. And it was a friend. I've also recently, and I find this often, right? We all have friends in the real estate business. Yeah. We have relatives. There's a property that expired. For those that don't know, on the MLS, right? We list them for a period of time. If they don't sell, they expire. And it's one of those assets that I like to look at. If there's something interesting where I think I can add value, I'll call those owners and say, hey, maybe this is why it didn't sell, right?
After it's expired.
After it's expired. It's listed with a residential agent. It's a very difficult commercial project, or intricate, I shouldn't say, not difficult, but intricate, a lot of issues. And it's listed with a residential agent who happens to be a relative. And I said, so you've had it listed for a year and a half. How's that working? And tried to explain why I thought this particular asset, which has very unique characteristics, should be marketed very differently and evaluated very differently. Mm-hmm. And he ultimately said, I got to stay with my relative. Yep. And that's fine. And it does. It happens. So, but I think the bottom line is if you don't have knowledge, then make sure you get someone who has knowledge to work with you. Right. And that's one of the biggest differences. Know that it's going to take longer. Understand that there's a lot of work. When we go to take a listing, I spend, or my team spends, sometimes days and days just evaluating the cash flows and financials, right? Before we even go to make a listing presentation. Right. We had one recently, property had been on the market, year and a half, almost 2 years. 3 different brokers, same price. Becomes pretty obvious, that maybe it's mispriced. Yeah. And so I said to the owner, would you share your financials with me? At first, she wasn't too excited. Yeah. But I don't take a listing if I don't have that, because you can't value it without the numbers, right? The fact that 3 agents had done that, it's a disservice to the client.
Every buyer
is going to want
the numbers.
Absolutely.
There's no point in them buying it.
It's all based on return on investment,
exactly.
Right? She gave me permission to talk to her accountant, which I did. And we got her financial statements and tax returns and spent about 2.5 weeks totally reconstructing the income and expense statement before we even went to make a presentation. And first question was, what you're going to list at? And I said, I don't know, because we haven't discussed your financials yet. So let's talk about them, right? Yeah. Many owners of property, especially in our market that are not institutional, oftentimes include expenses that might not be totally related to the property. Things like they've got insurance and they get a master insurance policy on the building, and it also includes autos, so their personal autos are on there. Well, that's not an expense of the building. So we have to rewrite and restructure the income and expense statements to really know what the income is. And that's a pretty standard policy for us. Yeah. Something I don't think many residential agents have the capacity to do. So.
Well, okay, so I was going to ask, what are some of the red flags? And you started getting into a few there. And I think it just comes down to doing the homework, understanding the numbers, understanding how does this property create value for other people?
Yes.
And are there other opportunities for that value that maybe we could see in market?
Absolutely.
But then, of course, breaking that back into return on investment, for a buyer.
Part of the red flags are, in my mind, there's a lot, but just several. Does your agent, can they do the due diligence for you or lead you along in the due diligence? Due diligence is really critical in the commercial world.
It's a lot different than in the residential world.
A lot different. There's everything from the market due diligence, property due diligence, type of asset and the people involved, reviewing legal documents. So, in the market, I'm always looking at where are demand drivers, where's access and roads, who's growing, where jobs are being created, where are people moving to, right? In the property itself, you have to look at everything from the construction type to how it's laid out. This morning I was looking at several office buildings, and each one had a very different core. And a core in an office building is how the elevators, the common areas, the bathrooms are all set up. Are they in the center of the building and you actually have a racetrack of offices around the outside? Are they set up at the end of the building where there's elevator and stairs all at one side? All those make a difference as to how efficient a building is and how much common area maintenance you're going to pay as a tenant, depending upon how the building is laid out. So we spend a lot of time looking at building specifics. Everything from the types of components, HVAC, electrical, security, how it was built, that sort of stuff. And then you really need to do due diligence on the parties involved. There are times when people don't necessarily are honest in the documents they submit.
Right.
And you need somebody that can see through it and ask questions as to why certain numbers are the way they are.
Right.
Which is part of why we break down all the financial statements.
Makes sense. Okay.
So red flags, I don't know. If your property's been on the market for a year and a half at the same price and hasn't sold, red flag, right?
Right.
And if you're a buyer, then recognize that maybe it's not price. It could be.
Yeah.
But there might be something else, right?
But there's something that's prohibitive.
Yes.
There's something.
Yes.
Yeah.
Piece of property we were talking about in our group this morning. We have a listing on a lot. The lot has been on the market 3 times with 3 different agents, all at the same price, never sold. We had offers, brought them. Turns out there is a pond, a dried up pond on the back of the lot that can't take a leach field for septic.
Right.
Okay. It's not always the price. In this case, it's probably the price and the physical characteristic of the land.
Yeah.
If you don't have experience in this kind of stuff, I don't want to say all residential agents don't, because there are some that are really good. Yeah. In our office, we have 4 classifications of agents. We have residential agents. We have resi-mercial agents, which basically do mostly residential and just a little commercial.
Yeah.
Com-resi agents, which is mostly commercial and a little bit of residential. And then we have com only. Some of those, we have some com-resi agents that are actually studying for their CCIM. They're taking the time to learn, and they'll be fully knowledgeable and ready to tackle anything. But that's not the case in most offices.
Even if someone's selling, let's say they're selling a flip house.
Right.
The commercial, if they go to a commercial agent, the commercial agent's probably like, I don't really have time to deal with this.
They don't do that, right?
Yeah, that's not what I do. Get a great residential listing specialist that blasts it out across social media and does a ton of marketing, and they're a fantastic marketer. That's what you need there. Maybe they provide staging, maybe they provide some stuff, and they specialize in that. Great. Likewise, if you're going for commercial, talk to somebody that does that day in and day out, and knows all the rules and regs.
And one of the things that I see often is we have very different places. Most of our listings don't go on MLS, or if they do, we're not expecting anything to sell there.
Yeah.
Right. If you want to go on Zillow, or if you want to go on Homes.com.
So where is the best place for people to find commercial?
There's a lot. Okay. One of the best is CoStar. Now, CoStar is not available to the general public to search, but it is where brokers and investors can go, and brokers go, and typically we put our best investment properties on CoStar.
Right.
There's an affiliate called LoopNet that you can search as an individual, but it doesn't take everything that's on CoStar. It actually costs more. Both of those are very expensive. They cost between right now, I guess about $8,000 to $10,000 a year per agent just to have access.
Wow.
Most residential agents won't have that.
No.
Okay.
And CoStar is also, they bought Homes.com?
They did buy Homes.com recently, yes.
So
they have several. They have something called
now.
Biz Buy Sell for business brokers.
Right,
they have Homes.com, LoopNet, and a couple others. We also use something called REI-NWA. I just subscribe to, which is Just Land. It's an interesting site that if you're going to be selling land, it'll tell you what the solar value of your property is if you wanted to do a solar farm.
Okay.
What kind of trees you have and the density and how much they're worth if somebody was to cut the timber.
Right.
most of the land that's sold in Northwest Arkansas, nobody does that kind of evaluation.
Yeah, no.
Right?
And they
It's
should.
just, and they're just doing a comp from, well, this sold for so much an acre, and so I'm right down the street. I got to be getting the same amount or a little more, right?
Right.
And in reality, there's so much more depth. Don't hire a dentist to do your heart surgery.
With that,
Yes.
I'm going to just make the pitch that if you are interested in commercial at all, please come out to our Builder Circle. It's going to be on July 2nd at the Golden Corral in Rogers.
Yes.
Doors open at 5:30. We'll mix and mingle for a little while. Stephen will get started around 6 and go into a full presentation on all
Absolutely.
this stuff and Q&A after.
I'll have slides they can look
Yeah.
at and take pictures of, and lots of Q&A.
Absolutely. So definitely come out for that. As always, it's $20 at the door, $0 if you are an REI-NWA member. You can be an REI-NWA member anywhere in the world now because you can actually join at our website and you get access to these programs, the one that's coming
Absolutely.
up, and years worth of backlogged programs that you get the private link to. So a ton of great content there. Well worth that small yearly membership to
Absolutely.
REI-NWA.
It's a great group. I'm
Yeah.
glad to be part.
Well, thanks again
You're
for
welcome.
coming out. This
Thank
was really
you.
awesome.
My pleasure.
Yes.
Good to see you.
Well, thanks for joining us on this episode of REI-NWA Podcast. We'll catch you on the next one.